done. Works beautifully.
What's going on, you guys? Welcome back. As you saw from the last video, I got a L99 from a 2013 Chevy Camaro SS, and along with the engine, I also got the 6L80E. And both of those, basically the entire drivetrain of that Camaro, is going in my Nova for a second rebirth, which I pretty much titled Reborn 2. So this Nova is going to go through extensive makeover once again. But it's all related to the drivetrain and of course the interior to go with the drivetrain. Because, well, the transmission, it's a big transmission. It's much bigger than the 200 R4 that I have in the Nova before I put this 6L80E. And well, it's going to require tonal modifications. So the interior will be modified as well as the engine bay. So you saw the engine turn on. It ran great. I didn't have any problems with it. Of course, I couldn't test out the transmission, but the main deal for me was that the engine worked beautifully. And as you saw from the video, it did. And what does that mean? Well, now that I have ran it, now that I know that it works, I can't just put it in the Nova. I have to take it apart and change it, change up the internals to fit my needs. And that's what we're gonna see in this video. We're going to see the extensive makeover of that L99 engine, in which I turned into a LS3 VVT engine, and the 6L80E is not left behind. Both of those are going to get reborn. First thing I noticed was that this engine did not have power steering. I removed the pulleys that was supposed to replace the power steering pump and set out to purchase a 2000 Camaro SS power steering pump. Next was the placement of the accessories. LS brackets had what I was looking for. AC on the passenger side and power steering on the driver's side. I then bought a new AC compressor with the serpentine pulley setup. For the power steering pump, I modified the power steering reservoir for the Hydro Boost return line fitting. I spoke a bit on this in my Hydro Boost video, which I will link in the upper corner. Here's a look at the belt I needed with my accessory setup. The belt routing with all the accessories. Now it mimics my 454 setup. I took it all apart and sent the brackets to get powder coated. They came back looking sweet. It's important that the alternator body gets ground, so I strategically removed powder coating to allow continuity of the engine ground through the brackets via the bolts that attach to the engine heads. Spacers were also filed clean at the ends. Now that the accessories are all done, it's time to work on the engine. Now, as stated, this is an L99 engine, and even though it's an LS3 twin, it has some extra features. One being variable valve timing, which I have explained earlier that I will be keeping. That I do want. But it also has displacement on demand, or AFM. And I don't want that in my car. I don't want the DOD system, so that stuff has to come out. And in order for you to get that stuff out, well, you have to do a partial engine rebuild. Basically a tear down. So what does that mean? Well, all the accessories that I put on has to come off, as well as the entire top of the engine, which is the heads, the intake manifold, injectors, the valley cover, and of course, behind the accessories, you have the timing chain cover, the timing chain, and of course, the camshaft has to come out. Now, the camshaft in the L99 engine is a special camshaft. It actually has two sets of lobes. One set of lobes are for the AFM, or the displacement on demand cylinders, which is only 4 of them. And then the other 4 lobes for the other 4 cylinders, they remain active throughout the operation of the engine. Now, the cylinders that deactivate their lobes are set to have 25 pounds less of compression, and that will, pretty much offset how the engine runs. So it has to come out. You can't just shut DOD off. You can't just, kind of shut it down and just keep driving, because you're gonna have 4 cylinders with a set compression, and you're gonna have the other 4 cylinders with 25 pounds less of compression. So the other thing that I don't want, or the other reason why I don't want AFM or displacement on demand, is because it has a high failure rate. And I'm all about keeping this car running. It's a daily driver. It's meant to go on long cruises, and I don't want it to be failing. So the best way to prevent all of that is to just remove that system entirely. So let the teardown begin, and I'm going to take you through what I had to do to get that system out. And of course, I will show you later in the video the new camshaft that I actually custom ordered to specific specifications to be able to keep VVT the entire phase of the VVT, and of course get some economy and performance out of my engine. All new GM parts were used: head gaskets, lifter trays, new LS7 lifters, new head bolts, new LS3 valley cover, and for the rockers, I replaced them with ones that had the trunnion bearing upgrade in the name of reliability, even though the ones in my engine looked brand new. When the heads came off, I noticed how the pistons looked. They weren't bad looking, but I felt it could use a brand new look to them. So I started to clean them up. Look at the difference. After a couple of hours, they looked like brand new pistons. The secret was oil eater. It's not even a harsh chemical. It's just a degreaser, and I also used wooden paint sticks and blue Scotch-Brite scouring pads, specifically the scouring side. Out comes the DOD camshaft, and I prepare the engine to be transferred to the engine stand. Did some more cleaning, and she looks beautiful. For the heads, I decided to clean them up as well. Same treatment was used as with the pistons. I also filled the valve chambers with oil eater to let it work on dissolving the carbon deposits. This also allowed me to see if the valve seats were sealing perfectly. After 24 hours, there was 0 leaks. Look how nice they came out. Nice and clean. So the new cam came in. Now let me explain how I got to the new cam's specifications. Now, as you know, this engine, the L99 engine, came with a special camshaft. I explained that earlier. Now, what makes this cam so special is that it has different lobe specifications for 4 of the cylinders as opposed to the other 4 cylinders. So the AFM cylinders had a certain spec, and the non-AFM cylinders had another spec. And my idea was, well, since I'm getting rid of the DOD, displacement on demand, and I want all the cylinders to react the same way, I took apart the engine. I can see that all of the pistons look exactly the same. So why can't I have one camshaft with all the lobes pretty much exactly the same? Obviously, not exactly the same, difference between the intake and the exhaust, but pretty much the same across the board. So I had that camshaft, with the specs. The specs that were for the AFM, I threw out the window. Didn't even want to look at them. Those were garbage. The specs for the non-AFM is what I concentrated on, and I brought that across the entire camshaft. Then, with those numbers in mind, I added a little bit of lift and a little bit of duration. Now, here's the deal. You can't just put all kinds of lift in the camshaft, because the camshaft for the VVT has a certain phasing. And in this case, the L99 engine came with, I believe it was 52 degrees of actual adjustability, phasing. Now, when you buy a camshaft that's like a stage 1, 2, or 3 that you find, on these websites, all those camshafts have one thing in common. You have to insert in the cam phaser thing, you have to insert a little thing, a little plastic, cube or whatever, and it limits the phasing to 20, I think it was 22 degrees if I'm not mistaken. So you're losing 30 degrees of adjustability. And if you've done research on VVT, the good and cool thing about VVT is that much like the old engines where you would adjust the camshaft, you know, either advance it or retard it to make the engine do different things, that's what VVT does in real time. And the ECU is programmed to give you more torque on the down low, you know, on low RPM, and give you a little bit more horsepower on the top end. And because it has that ability to adjust in real time while the engine is actually running, well, that's why I wanted VVT. I get the benefits of having fuel economy, at the same time having performance, depending on where in the RPM I'm driving the engine. And that is why I wanted to keep all 52 degrees of the cam phasing. I went through the trouble of creating this special one-off camshaft. So it's time to put the engine back together and let the makeover begin. The heads are clean, but need some color. I maxed them up, and for all the threaded holes, I inserted a screw into them to prevent paint from entering the threads. Here's the paint I used for the heads, and here they are with satin black caliper paint. I got some lube and an LS3 timing chain dampener. New cam lubed up and becoming one with the engine. Torque to specs using the proper tool angle gauge tool. Heads installed with new head gaskets and a new set of head bolts, and then went straight to masking her up for the makeover. As with the heads, every bolt hole was covered with a bolt. Time for paint. The engine is bare aluminum and I wanted to protect the metal, so I chose to prep the block with epoxy primer. Here's what I used. I set up my paint supplies and was ready to shoot some color, and as you may guessed, it's red. Paint gun of choice is my trusty 1.8 primer gun, and don't forget the mask. And now it's time to paint. It came out nice and now was protected. After 3 days, started to sand down the epoxy in prep for the real paint job. This step was important for the new paint to have some tooth. Also allowed me to sand out minor imperfections to make the engine look its best. It was not fun at all. Look at all those little pieces of sandpaper. For the final paint job, not only was the engine getting painted, but also the intake manifold cover. Here's the supplies. Bulldog adhesion promoter for the plastic, and the paint color is the same color as the car. Velocity red mica. Again, using my trusty 1.4 paint gun, my 1.0 detail gun, and a full face mask. Here's the paint process. Adhesion promoter. Then a coat of epoxy sealer. Sealer also applied to the engine. A couple coats of Velocity red and clear coats were applied. Man, I love this color. The next day, decided to treat the 6L80 transmission the same way. A couple coats of sealer, then Velocity red mica, then clear coat. Engine unmasked. The valve covers received new gaskets. New rockers were installed in sequence. After that was done, went for the oil pan. I ordered the Holley 302-2 black powder coated pan. I did the necessary modifications to the windlass tray and installed the new oil pan to complete the look. To get the oil pan properly aligned, you need to torque the pan with the transmission installed, as the tranny uses the oil pan as part of its mount. One more thing that I want to touch on in regards to the prep work I needed to do to the 6L80E to get it to fit in my Nova. You can't just install it with the pan that comes with the transmission. You have to get a pan that is much shallower. This is the new transmission pan. And with this pan, you will also need to get the correct filter. Part number will be in the description box below. The new filter has indentations for the valve body molded right on the filter body. New pan was installed,
bare with no paint and torqued in sequence. I moved the engine back on the Camaro subframe and continued to assemble all the accessories. Here she is, all made over and ready to fire up with its new build and its brand spanking new makeover.
Well, there you have it. The makeover of the LS3 engine with VVT and the 6L80E. Color matched to the Nova. So you know that that engine is going to be perfectly situated with the Nova. It's going to match. It's going to look great. It's going to look great. So sorry about the long wait to make this video. I've been really busy and it was kind of hard to kind of put all those pictures and kind of do the script to get the information out to you guys, so you can see how I did that, all the process I took to actually accomplish giving that engine a makeover. Try to explain with detail as much as I could, but if you have some questions, you can either hit me up in the comment section below, or go ahead and look at the description box below and you'll see that there's a link to my Instagram page, and there I always upload pictures, and so you can actually hit me up there as well if you have some questions, or you want some more details on this build. And if you wouldn't mind, I worked really hard on making this video. You wouldn't mind just hitting that like button, just a little click, and we're golden. Lets me know that you like what you see. It's great for the YouTube algorithm and makes me happy. So I would greatly appreciate that. So stay tuned for the next video, and if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and don't forget that notification bell, so that when I do upload that next video, which will come any minute now, you'll be ready to see that new video. And the last photo that you saw in this video, in the slideshow, that's the view you're gonna get when I turn on that engine. So you get to hear it, you get to see how it runs, all that hard work that I put into getting that engine, transformed from a L99 to a LS3 with VVT. You'll finally see it paying off. You'll finally see how it starts up and how it runs. So stay tuned for that next video. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Hit that notification bell. Don't forget the like button, and hit me up with some comments, questions, either down there in the description, in the comment section below, or on my Instagram. Well, hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching.